So now it's time to get into the koala hammock itself. I have not yet even unclipped this buckle, so I believe that we will find that this pouch is actually fabricated directly onto the hammock itself. And as I open this up, the first thing here, you do have straps. So these, I can tell you, are very similar to the ENO straps, like the Atlas straps, something like that. Very similar in overall construction. There are a number of companies that make straps very similar to these, and they are very effective. Here I have some spreader poles. So these are spreader poles. What looks to be maybe a sort of guy line, or I should say ridge line, for inside the hammock. So I know that there is a tablet holder, so I'm wondering if this is part of that. So I'm just going to put this away for the time being and not worry about it, and then we'll come back and revisit this later. But continuing on here and sort of removing the hammock here, you'll notice this is also a nice gray color. This is a parachute style hammock, so it's not the lightest of fabrics, but it is definitely reasonably durable, reasonably lightweight, and is very comfortable to lay in. You'll see here a couple of carabiners, so one for each side. I know one of these color-coded is for the head side. It's probably the blue, but we're going to find out once we get further into this. Now, I may decide to go with a lighter weight strap than this. It just depends. But the good thing about these is there's a ton of adjustability, and they're very durable, strong. They can hold a lot of weight. And the fact that they're nice and long gives me good overall reach between the trees. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility as I set this up. So you'll notice as I set this up that I want the hammock to be directly below the tarp. I did bring the blue carabiner to this end. I believe this end will be the head end. So let's look at the actual hammock now that we have it set up. So as I mentioned, paying close attention to make sure that the head end is underneath the tarp, as well as the foot end. And as I look at it here, there is about, I would say, maybe 8 inches to a foot on each side of this for overlap. Now, if you decided you wanted more overlap, you could put the tarp on a diagonal, which would give you more overlap on the head and foot end, which is sometimes advantageous. But at this point, I do have it set up this way for the demonstration. We're going to take a look at the overall features and quality of this hammock, again being a parachute style hammock. Now you'll notice that on the inside there is already a ridge line. So connecting from one end to the other, there is a ridge line along the top of the hammock holding the bug net off of the actual hammock itself. So I need to, at this point, kind of sort this out, straighten it out, and make sure that I have it oriented in the proper direction. But you'll notice already that some of these pouches seem to be falling in the appropriate places. Looks to me like I have this right side up at this point. So at this stage of the game, I think I need to kind of unzip this and check to see whether or not this is at the appropriate height. So as I look at the construction of the hammock, the bug net is zippered on both sides to the hammock, which is nice. It gives you the flexibility to get in and out of your shelter on either side. So at this point, I know I have the head end on this side. The blue carabiner was the head end, so that's something I now understand as I move forward in setting this up in the future. But I'm just going to test this at this point to make sure I have the height at the appropriate level. And as you can see, there is a bit of stretch in these nylon webs, so I need to get this whole thing jacked up. So making the adjustment, now this is absolutely the perfect height. And that's something that just takes a little bit of practice. You know, you kind of need to go through it to get it right, and at this point I feel a lot better about this. Now I did get this a little bit tighter, and what that does is it actually levels out the hammock just a bit, which will give me a better night's sleep. And so now testing out the overall lay quality, I have my head a little bit low. So I basically need to bring my head end up a little bit and my foot end down. So as we go through the construction here, you'll see there is a large piece of webbing that basically makes up the suspension system on this side. Now with this carabiner and then the straps that we've already discussed, that is pretty much what's keeping this on the tree. So at this point, you know, these are decent overall suspension straps. They're certainly not lightweight. I mean, this whole setup to me is not really overall a lightweight option. It's a quality option and a comfortable option, and that's kind of the point of a lot of Crua gear. They're not always going to be the lightest, but they're going to give you a good quality and comfortable camping situation. That's certainly the case with the Koala here. And then the fact that this has the bug net is absolutely a must. I don't know about you, but I am definitely in a buggy area, so to have the bug net is just critical. But the cool thing about this setup, and really part of what Crua is going for, is some of the organization that you see here. So a good amount of organization, tons of pockets, the ability to hang some gear beside you, but then there are also pockets on the inside of this, which we'll touch on shortly. So the overall idea with Crua gear being that quality and comfortable camping experience. And now talking about the comfort, one of the things that's tough is sometimes having the bug net just falling on your face. So there are some spreader bars that can be installed into these sleeves. So at this point, let's grab those spreader bars, get them installed, and we'll look a little deeper at how this looks once we get those in place. So these spreader bars are a rather standard design, pretty similar to most tent poles that you would see, but the only difference being that they have a curve to them. So these are curved, have a little bit of a hoop shape, and that will give this the overall dome capability to keep that mesh off your face. So taking this here and sliding it through this sleeve, you'll see it is like a cloth sleeve on the outside of the netting, just kind of feeding it through. And then there is a grommet, so tucking that into the grommet and pushing this up. That is a very nice feature. I greatly enjoy this feature. That is one of the things that makes my DD hammock, jungle hammock, so enjoyable. And so there is the start of this. Now, continuing on the other side, I have to do the same thing. And voila. So you can see at this point, now that this is kind of puffed up, that my hammock is like way up in the air. And you know what? For me, that's actually not a bad thing. That works out pretty well. I don't have a problem getting in here. I will grab onto this, I'll pull it down, I'll kind of scoop my butt up inside, and that gets me well off the ground. Now, if it's ridiculously windy, that may be a slight disadvantage. I probably want to get a little lower to the ground, but for all the other times, I don't have a problem with that. And in fact, it allows me to put the rest of my gear nicely beneath me. When I'm laying down at night, I can actually reach down and grab some of the stuff, gets it out of my way, and gives me a good quality sleep situation. Now, it does look like the actual tarp is kind of rubbing on the mesh. Well, once I lay in there and the whole thing sags down, that won't be a problem. And that's just kind of the nature of this stuff. You get it as close as you can, you make little adjustments, but for the most part, it tends to work out. Now, as you look at the end of these poles, as I mentioned, basically this goes through these grommets, and at this point you can see that there are these pockets on the inside of the hammock. So moving from one end to the other, just different places to put different components and gear, which I think is going to be great. And then a couple of pockets on the outside, and most specifically here, the insulated beer koozie pocket on the outside. So like I mentioned, Crua really having a focus on comfort and quality in your camping experience, and this is definitely an indication of that. So moving on now to one of the next components in this full kit is the Crua quilt. So here I will be using this as an underquilt. So my ability to practice in this situation and get this mounted to the underside of this hammock is definitely going to be a must. So I'm going to take this out, take a look at it, and figure out what I need to do to get this beneath the hammock. Now, I'm not too sure what these straps are for, but I don't want them to go too far, so I'll put them inside the stuff sack and we'll revisit these later. Okay, so it took me a little bit, but at this point I do have the underquilt mounted underneath the hammock. Now I know that I am not setting this up the way that Crua suggests. I kind of took my own liberties here, so I may be giving you some bad advice, but I'm going with it anyway. So you'll see here this ridge line. It's not really a ridge line, it's actually a tie out, but I have used it along this sort of length of the hammock here to hold up this underquilt. So with that said, you'll see that the underquilt has all of these loops. Now I use this to my advantage to help me sling this nicely and evenly underneath the hammock. At this point, I kind of wish there was one last loop on the middle of this quilt just to hold this in place, but in theory I would be able to unzip the hammock, get the bug net open, slide myself in here, close that up, and this would pull itself nicely into place right around me. I believe that Crua's intention is that you basically use these sort of strings here to like tie it to one end. That is not how I approach this, and you'll see that there is a bungee that you can pull tight. So on this end I still have it a little bit loose, but on this end I got it nice and tight and snug right around the head end of this, and this seems to work very well. And then the other thing that you'll notice is there's these nice little clips that you can use to kind of keep the bug net taut, and I've used all of these different attachment points all the way back to the carabiner. So I've made little loops, and I've basically got everything to the perfect size so that every component related to this at this point, the underquilt, these little sort of tensioning lines, and then everything else comes all the way back and tightens to these carabiners. So very quick and easy to use, and at this point I should be able to simply climb in here, opening this up, getting inside, and then once I get inside I can basically reposition this just a little bit and then zip the bug net shut, and I should be good and protected. And the good thing with this underquilt is it is water resistant, so it does have some water repellent capabilities. Nice to keep my underside not only nice and warm but also a little bit dry. And there's only one way to test my theory, and that's to go for it. So as long as I'm careful and I don't allow this to really pull too much on the net, I'm in good shape. You will see that the underquilt is tugging on this just a little bit right here. That is the one downfall I have with this setup, but as I get that kind of back into place, it did bunch up and pull away from me. So theoretically, if I could get a piece of that bungee cord and pull it to that end, it would hold it nice and tight. But for the most part, this seems to be working. That's not bad. You will see on this side that the underquilt is very high. If I could get this nice and even, this would be a wonderful windstop. I mean, that is just beautiful and really wraps right around me very well. Gives me good coverage all the way out to my feet. Now I do need to use that bungee cord and cinch the foot end shut, so that's something I need to practice, but at this point I think I'm getting close. Just need to be a little bit careful as I exit out, but that's not bad. So that's what happened to me. Basically this side here kind of pulled out just a little bit, so I need to be just a touch mindful of that, a little bit careful, but for the most part this does seem to work. So it's going to take me a little bit of messing with this, a little bit of finesse, but I think if I can get that bungeed that way, I'll have something that's definitely successful. So at this point, I'm going to call this setup round one. I have definitely learned some things about this that I know I need to adjust to, and that's just fine. That's the way it goes. That's why I'm out here today. Now it's getting worse and worse. The trees are almost sideways. I'm definitely running out of time until I get absolutely dumped on. So at this point, I'm going to pack everything up, but I'm going to come back at you with some adjustments. So we'll reconvene on this in part two. So before I go away, I'd like to say thank you very much to Crua, who has provided this for review. I am an ambassador for Crua Outdoors, and so by getting these products in my hands, testing them out, not only gives you an understanding of what Crua is up to, but also gives Crua an understanding of how their community is using their products. And that's exactly what this is today. So all right guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now, and we'll see you soon.